This is Address the Harm podcast. I'm Leah Brown, FRSA, your host, founder of the Wayfinders Group and architect of the Coalition for Institutional Accountability. Please be aware that this podcast discusses difficult topics, including violence, abuse, and suicide. Listener discretion is advised. This podcast centres the voices that Britain's institutions work hardest to silence: survivors of institutional harm. New polling shows 53% of Britons believe preventing future harm matters most when institutions cause damage. Yet our systems are designed for crisis management, not prevention. 62% of the public believe survivors should be involved in institutional responses, and yet they're systematically excluded. From NHS failures to police cover-ups, survivors have become unwilling experts in institutional failure. They know what went wrong, why it keeps happening, and how to stop it. But institutions rarely ask them. On Address the Harm, we do. Survivors will share not just their stories, but their blueprint for prevention. Because when institutions finally listen to those they failed, that's when real accountability becomes possible. It's time to address the harm. It's time for prevention over prosecution. I'm thrilled today to welcome Issy Vine to the podcast. Issy Vine is a former Metropolitan Police 999 call handler turned campaigner for institutional accountability and violence against women and girls prevention. After 5 years working in the Met, Issy left the force following experiences of workplace misogyny and harassment that were inadequately addressed by institutional processes. Her story highlights how policies designed to protect the reputation of police officers often prioritise their image over individual employees and public's safety. She now campaigns through her blog A Can of Worms and is pursuing legal action against the Met for their mishandling of her case. She advocates for robust, independent systems of reporting misconduct and argues that in public services, the stakes are too high to give perpetrators of harassment second chances when they interact with vulnerable members of the public daily. Issy, welcome to Address the Harm podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you so much.
I wonder if you could tell our listeners a whistle-stop tour of your journey, maybe in about 90 seconds.
Oh, okay. Worked for the police for 5 years, was a call handler and a dispatcher. Sat next to a colleague one day who said very racist, problematic comments. I had to, and followed me after work. I had to escalate that. He was dismissed. There were lots of failures within that, failing to let me know what was going on and making me go and work with him, etc. But he was eventually dismissed at Scotland Yard for gross misconduct. 4 months later, he was rehired with the allegations still proven because the chair of the appeal just thought it was too harsh to dismiss someone like that, and that VAWG and Casey report have too much influence in the police and make them be more harsh than they need to be, and you can have any opinion you want in the police, and no matter how harmful, it's just when it turns into behaviour they'll act. And then I escalated that because I was very concerned, and that got hidden for 5 months, my report. And then I had to sort of eventually speak out. My mental health declined. I was very suicidal. The Met kept putting me in high-risk roles, even though they weren't supposed to, and it was just an all-round failure to protect public and their staff and me. And so I had to leave and speak out, and I set up my own organisation, and it's just a snowball from here, really. But yeah, that's roughly it.
What a journey. I mean, from the first time that you realised that things were awry at work, what gave you the confidence to stand up and speak up?
Well, I mean, on the initial day when I actually encountered the colleague who made racist, misogynistic slurs, etc., and followed me, I was very confused at the time what to do. We never really had training about how to report, just that you need to, and that, like, you know, if you hear something bad, just report it. But that was it. I didn't know how to, I guess I went home that day. I had about 8 hours until my next shift, and I had to sleep and think about what to do and find out what to do. And I just knew in the morning, how could I have gone on and not reported it? Like, that's just not me. And that's also not policing. Policing is to stand up to what's wrong, and advocate for those who can't, and call out wrongdoing. And I would be a complete fraud if I didn't. And I'm naturally quite a vocal person that always finds myself sort of speaking on someone else's behalf for them if they can't. So yeah, I just had to, and also in the wake of Sarah Everard, and many more victims of police crime and misconduct, it's literally a police person's duty to stand up to wrongdoing. I joined just slightly before Sarah Everard, but still with the same intentions that, you know, there were previous cases, even back to Stephen Lawrence. I don't want to be complicit or contribute to policing that's actually harmful. So I would always have done that. But it was not what I expected, the process, not at all.
In terms of that process of escalating things about your line manager to, I suppose, their line manager or an objective, supposedly objective, third party, when was the first indication that you were facing an uphill battle in getting heard and in getting the type of response that you would expect in a misconduct situation?
I mean, the initial investigation, I can't complain too much about it, apart from they failed to offer me welfare support and failed to keep me in the loop of what was going on, which led to like a lot of anxiety, and I had to go off sick because I wasn't sure if I was going to see him or not, and then no one else knew, so they were putting me in departments with him, and that was not great. But it really wasn't until after he'd been rehired and I'd met the chair of the appeal that I knew, like, something has gone really, really wrong. The misconduct process initially it could have been better, but it was fine. They dismissed him. They said, we don't have any space for anyone like that. Violence against women and girls is very serious, and we need to, listen to the Casey review, etc., and do better. But yeah, when the turning point was when he was rehired, and I met the decision maker, and he explained his rationale that, you know, he believes me. Even if I'd have recorded it, it wouldn't have made a difference. It's just that he thinks, I mean, the comments, I say it on my social media a lot, the comments were so vulgar and disgusting and dangerous, and are very much part of the rape culture triangle, and racist, etc. And the following home after, you know, the clear pattern of escalation, you know, this man from very high up in the Met just thought it was too harsh to dismiss someone that was capable of that, because in his view it wasn't that bad, you know. And I just, even thinking about that meeting now, just the absolute shock I was in when he said, you know, the VAWG campaign and the Casey review just bear too much influence on misconduct panels and makes them dismiss people who aren't deserving. I was just in so much shock, because that's the VAWG campaign and the Casey report was all we were seeing on our work computers, in the news, in our training. It's really serious. I mean, and it's, and as it should have been. And then here you have this director who's three from the top saying that it didn't really matter, and it just sort of made a bit of a nuisance. So yeah, that's when I knew things were really, really wrong, and then it kind of just got worse and worse and worse from there.
Before I hear about how this has both impacted and also transformed your life, I'd be really interested to hear more about what you learned about how this institution has operated. You mentioned he was three from the top. You mentioned that the initial investigation was fine, and that ultimately the problem was that this individual ended up being rehired. What did that show you about who you were working for?
It showed me, and I know people said this before, and you'd think it, but maybe I was not naive, but I believed that it was changing because of, you know, the VAWG campaign and the Casey review and everything like that, and all the victims of police misconduct and crime. But it really, really is. My case is a perfect example of the boys at the top having a set of rules for themselves and follow a different set of guidelines for themselves as they do with their staff and their officers who are below them. And there is a element of just, you know, I don't even know how to describe it. Like they're just no one holds them account because they're all so high up. I mean, I know a lot of the time when I went to escalate my concerns about the director, a lot of people said, oh, it's really uncomfortable for us because he's our boss. So how are we supposed to hold him accountable? So there's this kind of like air of like untouchable, we can do what we want. No one else answers to us. We're the final signature on things. So, it's our last word. Or, and even the fact that when I escalated those concerns, no one progressed them for 5 months. And it wasn't until I started speaking out what they had to. There's just this air of no one holds us accountable. And even to the point where, when I did start speaking out and they did finally, respond to my complaint about the director rehiring the colleague and his rationale, they would say, oh, well, we don't think it's that bad and we're not going to give you a rationale as to why because it wouldn't be useful. So there's even they can just do what they want, and it's not like they have to follow legislation and guidelines and policy too, but then there's no one above them making sure that they do that. Because, I mean, for example, I'm entitled to a rationale of a decision of a complaint that I've made. But there we have someone who's very, very senior in Scotland Yard telling me he's not going to give that to me because it wouldn't be useful. It's things like that. They can just do what they want. And the force, and I think this is universal, operates on gaslighting tactics. They are very silent, so they make you wait and wait and wait. So you just feel like you don't get responses for ages, whether you're a member of public or a staff member. So you just have to give up because you just can't be bothered anymore. Or you then so say you make a complaint, they don't reply for ages, and then there's no sort of set deadline that they're statutory meant to reply to you on. When you make a complaint, it just says respond to the complaint in good time. So they hold out and they hold out and they're silent and they're silent until you start sort of questioning, was this even, maybe I'm being over the top then, maybe I shouldn't have made this complaint, I'll just withdraw it. So they operate on really sadistic, subtle, but yet powerful tactics that are really psychologically torturing. I know that sounds really dramatic, but everything they did with me, having tissues already in the room before I enter, are you sure he said that, are you sure, or do you need to talk to your GP, things like that they're very sadistic and psychologically traumatizing, and they just get away with it.
You mentioned misogyny at the very start. I guess my question is, did they treat men and women in the same way when a complaint was being made?
I don't know, because I don't know everyone who's complained. But what I will say is, looking at my complaint, I'm a female. I made a complaint about a male. I didn't hear anything in the first month back. In the first few days of the complaint against him, he was given an investigation officer and a welfare officer. And every decision that was made that was problematic, was made by a man. And I wonder if that is because the colleague that I reported was a man. So there was an element of sort of, well, it's not that bad because maybe we do it. But yeah, there is. And the comment from the director who rehired the colleague, who said, the original panel were too influenced by the VAWG report. Well, the original panel was 2 women and a man from HR. So that really fed to me. The original panel who dismissed him were 2 women who obviously are going to be more impacted by the VAWG campaign and the Casey review. So maybe they just wanted to get rid of him because of that. And so there's misogyny and just the tissues. And then, also when I sat in that meeting, I was so shocked by what he was saying about, let's just dismiss VAWG, that I was I can't shout at a superior when I'm cross. So I'm that person that just sort of bursts out crying. And I felt like he was putting me into the category. I was so irritated with myself because I was so distressed about what he was saying, but he was kind of putting me into that box that he'd already seen me as, with the tissues out, and are you sure, you need welfare? I was putting myself in that box of an emotional woman that he thought I was, and that was really irritating. But yeah, there's misogyny in all walks. I can't say if it's that they treat men differently with complaints necessarily, but in my case, I felt like it might have been very different if I was a man complaining about another man or a man complaining about women.
I'm really interested in this minimizing of your experience because it's clear that harm has been experienced here. As you've gone through the subsequent processes of escalating and bringing things to people's attention and advocating for yourself, at what point was the harm that you have experienced acknowledged?
I don't think it was until I went to work one day and I said I'd just tried to kill myself on the way. Because, they kept... I never had welfare officers given to me until it was because I got to work and I was bursting out crying. Or, and I was like, please, can someone listen to me? No one's replying. It was always the last point. But I feel like they really were like, oh my God. When I went to work one day, I drove to work and I was in hysterics. I was just really triggered. Even going to the building or doing the route to work was really triggering me. I felt like a massive fraud. I felt really I just felt that how can I know it's really over the top, but maybe it's not, but I don't think it is. But that I was kind of looking at other officers and other staff and thinking oh God, have you been rehired for doing something really bad, but the Met don't think it's that bad, so they've rehired you and you've done weird things too. So I was really triggered, and I it was raining really badly and I was crying my eyes out and I nearly crashed. And then I remember not stopping myself. I had a split second of just letting me sort of carry on nearly crashing. I can't even explain it. And then I kind of snapped out of it. And then I would have thoughts of okay, well, tomorrow I'll just try and get hit by a bus. But not that bad, so at least I can be in hospital for a few months and be away from work, things like that. And I told work, and I got to work and I had a massive breakdown. They had to get my family who worked there as well to come and calm me down. And I think that's the point where they thought, God, this is really bad. But still, then it was only at that moment when I was crying in hysterics, and they sort of passed the buck over to my family member to look after me, and they didn't even. I just remember saying, can my family member take me home, please? I've driven and I've just tried to kill myself driving. I don't really want to drive back on my own. And they were like, no. So I had to wait in my car for 4 hours till 1 a.m. for my family member to finish. There was just, I think they knew how bad it was, but they just never really cared or put it. I mean, everyone's there just to get their money. And I guess you get that with any big business. No one actually cares. And I think it was just a thing where they were like, we just have to make sure she's okay so she doesn't kill herself so we don't get in trouble.
Talk to me about how and who was supporting you during this period.
So I had two colleagues who I was friends with, who I would speak to about the situation. They were supporting me as much as they could. But in terms of, I obviously family as well, but I think I'm the kind of person I don't want to keep talking about something to someone. There's only so many times you can, and everyone's got their own problems. So I suppose I had support from family and friends, but I guess I didn't really use it that much because I didn't want to burden people. But at work, I remember at one point, after my mental health was really getting bad, they started sort of, at that point, I'd be like, just don't even bother offering me a welfare support officer now because I've literally gone through the worst on my own. It would be irritating. And then they'd sort of forcibly put a welfare officer in the room who ended up just being dodgy as well. But yeah, I suppose my family and friends I had, but I'm just my own worst enemy. I just go through things on my own.
You're listening to the Address the Harm podcast with Issy Vine. We're going to have a short ad break.
A woman was raped? No, a man raped a woman. The Right Words campaign asks journalists, institutions, social media, and the public to change the language. Join us at therightwordsproject.org.
You're listening to the Address the Harm podcast with Issy Vine. Let's dive back into the conversation. It's heartbreaking to hear about how things needed to go south for you for you to be taken seriously in the workplace. Did you see this pattern repeat with anyone else in your immediate team or wider floor, or maybe the force at large?
Do you know what? I didn't, but that's because there isn't a big culture of calling people out. So I didn't know any colleagues that had made a complaint. There were multiple other incidents that I was there that someone had done something really problematic, and there were other witnesses in the room. But none of them complained about anything that happened. I obviously didn't continue complaining, otherwise I'd just get tagged as a nuisance complainer. But no one else would call out things, and so I didn't witness. I honestly didn't witness anyone else standing up to wrongdoing or anything like that. No one wants to rock the boat, understandably, because you're like with each other for 12 hours in one room. It's really awkward. And that was one of the reasons why I didn't actually complain about the original colleague at the time, because I was just so anxious to spend the whole shift with him. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know a single person in my team or anything like, even the wider, that made a complaint. So I couldn't say if it. I can only imagine. Now I've left and I've spoken out and people contact me, I know that it's affected the force at large. But I didn't witness anyone else making a complaint, and hence I felt more of a bit of a nuisance as well, because I was the only one sort of in the whole department that was causing a fuss. So yeah.
If they had asked you, what would you like to change, or what needs to be different here, what would you have answered them?
So I think what would have saved a lot of heartache, at least for me, selfishly, is that the minute you make a complaint about a colleague, you're automatically given a welfare officer and a point of contact to know what's going on. Because I didn't hear for weeks, and I was so anxious. I think also there's other duty of care things that they can do, where they notify your line manager that you've gone through this, because they didn't with mine. And, notify the other people on the floor so they don't put you with said colleague, which is what happened to me. I think, I hope this comes in legislation later this year, that I've been told that hopefully it will, that with certain offences, VAWG-related offences, but I think it could even stretch out to a lot more, at least discrimination as well. Automatic suspension if you're under investigation, because the colleague that I reported who said the most horrific things and escalated and followed me after work was just allowed to carry on taking reports and stuff for the whole time he was under investigation. And I just think that's really gross. So that would have helped. There's so many other things in terms of law and policies that they need to change. They never will, and I've spoken to the Home Office that they won't. Intertwined in policy and guidance from the Home Office and the College of Policing, there's a lot about, the harm, the level of harm, weighing up the level of harm in a misconduct case is very intertwined with reputation and public knowledge of the incident. And I just think it's so harmful. You have so many cases, like I always refer back to PC Vicente from the Met Police, published on their website, who cyberflashed and sent unsolicited private pictures to female officers and pursued multiple relationships with them, even though they said no. Only got a warning because it was on a private WhatsApp, so it wasn't in the public knowledge, so the harm is low. And so you have this officer that can continue to work in the police who, is a predator. So lots in legislation. I think they give a lot of weight to mitigating circumstances, which I just think are irrelevant. Give weight to how many years the officer has served, the skill set. Whether or not they're remorseful, just irrelevant, really. But I'm quite black and white about it. There are so many things that need to change, but I suppose those are quite important. Obviously, there's so much I'd love to change about how they dealt with misconduct. I think also an independent body needs to be created, and not the IOPC, because that's not independent. That's full of ex-coppers, and I've used the IOPC twice in this whole case. just because I thought, like, what else have I got to lose? And my case kind of is a general corruption of, going up to Mark Rownley. And I went to the IPC and they just referred me straight back to the Met. So it's so dodgy. Like, the only way the IPC will take on an investigation is if the force refers themselves. Well, okay, so you're putting that trust in the force to refer themselves to someone who will investigate them. It just doesn't make sense.
This is why we're advocating for an independent office for institutional accountability. One reason of many, because these organizations are policing themselves. The disciplinary process is escalated within, signed off within, and people are sent out. And it's really not protecting people over whom they have a duty of care.
Exactly. No one should be able to mark their own homework. I mean, I've written to the Home Office many times asking them to consider abolishing, I mean, it's very drastic, but it needs to be done, abolishing internal professional standard departments in policing. I think it should be like all across the board in public services, but let's just start with policing. And they say no, they won't do that because they see it as the perfect way for police forces to measure where they're going wrong with society. Absolute nonsense, because you can still have an independent body that investigates misconduct and reports back to the force to let them know what they're doing wrong. So it's a joke, and the Home Office aren't a fan, because then I guess one day that will open up a body for them to investigate them, and they don't want that either. So yeah, I don't know. I've kind of forgotten the question now, because this situation is, you can just go on like so many different tangents and rants.
One of the things we raised in the white paper that was published in June about moving from harm to healing and rebuilding trust in Britain's publicly funded institutions, of which the Met Police is, of course, one. We set out a blueprint for change with 4 A's. So for our listeners, those are acknowledgement, apology, accountability, and amends. Which of those are the most important to you, Issy, especially as you campaign for change? What do you think is the crux of the challenge that we face for changing the culture in these institutions?
I think you're really anyone, as I have, will really struggle to get acknowledgement and an apology, because that will be accepting that they've failed. And they can't do that, because then that would let the reputation down, which is what their shaky foundations are based on. So I think that's a struggle, but it's needed, obviously. And I don't know why it's a struggle, because if you're a decent police force, then you'll just have no qualms. And it's so ironic, because when you apply to go into the Met, there's a competency framework and core policing values, etc. And there's always one about accountability and just owning up to where you're wrong and learning and moving forward with learning where you've gone wrong. And I just sit here now and I just think, all those core policing values and the framework is just, it's just so ironic, because it's just not what the police force is. But I think anyone finds a hard time trying to get, an acknowledgement or an apology from the Met. And that's why so many people have to take them to court, and other police forces. So, I mean, they're all very important, all the A's, obviously. But what would go a long way for me, and what I keep writing to the Met, and what is heavily entwined in my tribunal, is, I just want you to acknowledge what you've done, and I just want you to apologize for what you've done and acknowledge what you put me through, when all I did was just sign up to work for you to help. So yeah, I think personally, acknowledgement and an apology would do wonders.
You're campaigning at the moment for Isabel's Law. Could you give our listeners a brief overview of what that is? Because that's the heartbeat of your response to what you endured.
Yeah, so I mean, it's very new, and obviously I'm not a lawyer, and I'm just trying to put it out there and see what I get with the public and with politicians. I just think obviously you have Sarah's law and you have Claire's law, which are very, very, very important. But I've always thought to myself, especially after what I've gone through, oh gosh, if I would ever need the police, I would now in my head just think, oh gosh, like what if you've been in trouble for the same as what I reported a colleague for and you're still serving, you're racist and you follow other staff home, but and now you're dealing with me, and you could be dealing with me for a hate crime or something that you've been investigated for. So I think Isabel's law really is to create, I suppose it'd be great for every public service, but a national police misconduct body that would at least, it would be a shame, it would be ideal if they could investigate all misconduct instead of the police, but obviously the Home Office don't want that, but they would overview. My ideal dream would be staff member makes a complaint against another staff member, it gets sent to professional standards, and there's statutory legislation that forces them to at least notify this body that they've received a complaint, and the PSD will deal with the complaint, but they'll have to feed back how they dealt with it, what the outcome is, just so this body can overview and make sure that that is fine. But also this body will have a register full of misconduct outcomes and gross misconduct outcomes, because currently nationally with forces, they do publish their officer gross misconduct outcomes and some misconduct outcomes. Some are anonymous, which I think is gross. How can an officer or a staff member, well, they're only officers, but how can officers be in charge of civil liberty and have certain powers over us, but they get to be Officer A or Officer B? I don't understand that there's just no point even publishing those kind of ones. So there'll be a register, and it would contain staff misconduct as well, which is I've always campaigned for from the very beginning. Police staff are civilians. They are dealt with under employment law and not the same legislation and guidance as officers. That is very problematic because, like in my example, the guy I reported was a civilian, and people really underestimate the power that a police staff member can have. Sometimes they are the ones that are overseeing what police officers go to, and they get the last say of the whole borough. Sometimes they are taking your 999 calls and can choose not to send it down to dispatchers, and no one ever knows. People really underestimate, and I think a lot of the attitude and the culture issues within police staff environments, control room, etc., they will not change if they are not held to the same account as officers. But I suppose a lot of people say, they're not public facing. Doesn't matter. You're still in contact with the public, whether that's through phones, dispatching. You're still affecting a member of public. So it would have the staff misconduct and gross misconduct outcomes on there too, so that if you are a victim of crime or a member of public and a police officer or a police staff member is dealing with you, and for whatever reason you just want to know, or you've got a funny feeling, or you're not sure how this officer is dealing with you in a strange way or whatnot, you have the statutory right to request the misconduct history of that officer or staff member. Whether that's the first step you take before making a complaint to see if there's any weight to your intuition or gut feeling, or just if you just want to be safe. And I just really don't understand why we don't have that. A lot of people like to say, well, the officers are published online. Yes, but some of them are anonymous. Some of them don't go into great depths. And also the police staff are not on there either. But that's sort of the bulk of it. But, I'm not a lawyer, and I'm just trying to make sure it's, there are elements of it that already exist, but I'm just trying to, over the next few months, trying to work out a way where it can cover everything that is missed, all the loopholes. But yeah, everyone should deserve. I don't want to go out on the street and have an officer deal with me who's, had a warning because they've said, a racist slur, or no, I don't want that, and I should have the right to know that. Officers and staff get a blanket of invisibility when it comes to that, and I'm not having it anymore.
What do you think the one thing is that you want politicians to understand?
Oh, well, it's just, even the word politicians just gets on my nerves because it's so performative. I want them to understand too that they are not above the law either. And this will actually benefit and help them too. They are members of the public as well. And their job, just like policing, is to look after the welfare of the public. And it should be in their best interests. If they really do, as they say, care about violence against women and girls, want to halve it in a decade, etc. You can't halve violence against women and girls in a decade if you're still enabling it to happen within policing. Because how on earth, it just doesn't make sense, within the actual authority that's supposed to tackle that. It's rife there, and you're not addressing that. It doesn't make sense. But to be honest, I've given up with politicians anyway. I've spent the last year writing to them. No one really cares, apart from Zoe from the Green Party. She's been lovely and she's supporting me. But yeah, I just want them to understand that, well, I was going to say it's not hard to just do the right thing, but maybe it is, because then this opens up a can of worms within politics as well. But if you really want to halve violence against women and girls, you need to really, really focus on policing first.
It's really powerful. And I'm not going to add anything to that closing statement. Issy, I'm so grateful for you giving up your time to come and have this conversation. I hope it will be fruitful for your advocacy, but certainly at the Coalition for Institutional Accountability, we're very grateful for your support.
Thank you so much for having me.
This is the Address the Harm podcast for the Coalition for Institutional Accountability. We're fighting to end the tortfeasor as compensator system, where institutions investigate themselves, costing billions of pounds annually, whilst survivors get nothing. You can be part of changing this system. Follow at Address the Harm on social media. Visit addresstheharm.org to support our campaign. Every donation funds our fight to stop institutions investigating themselves. Share this episode, join our movement, because survivors' voices are the key to prevention. We hope you've enjoyed this episode. You've been listening to Address the Harm podcast, copyright 2025, production copyright Leah Talks Limited, all rights reserved.